Mornings in Tannersville were predictable in the way only small-town routines could be. The sun would rise lazily, stretching its warm fingers across cracked sidewalks and overgrown lawns. Shopkeepers would flick on their neon open signs with varying degrees of enthusiasm, and Owen Harper, master of his own monotony, would make his way to the corner cafe for the same cup of black coffee he'd been ordering for years. On this particular morning, however, the universe had decided to rewrite the script. Owen was halfway through his coffee, a medium roast with just a hint of cardboard, and debating whether it was worth the effort to walk to the hardware store when she appeared. Not through the door, mind you. Not in any way that would make sense to someone accustomed to the rules of gravity and common decency. No, the woman simply wasn't there. And then she was. One blink, a flash of light, and suddenly, there she stood, as if she'd taken a wrong turn out of a science fiction novel. She didn't belong in Tannersville, or maybe anywhere on Earth. Her presence was as jarring as a Picasso painting hanging in a laundromat. Dressed in a flowing silver garment that shimmered like liquid mercury, she had an aura that demanded attention. Her hair, an almost iridescent shade of blue, cascaded down her back in waves that seemed to catch the light in ways physics hadn't yet approved, and her eyes, Owen would later swear they looked like galaxies caught in amber, locked onto him as if he were the only person in the cafe. "Hello, Owen Harper," she said, her voice carrying an accent that wasn't quite of this world. Owen blinked. Hi? The cafe went silent. Even the sound of the espresso machine sputtering to life seemed to hold its breath. People were staring now, their curiosity barely contained behind half-raised coffee mugs and unread newspapers. "I have traveled a long way to meet you," the woman continued, her tone calm, but tinged with something Owen couldn't quite place. Determination, perhaps, or maybe just an alien's version of small talk. Owen cleared his throat, his brain scrambling for something resembling a coherent response. Okay. Well, mission accomplished, I guess." Her lips quirked into a small, amused smile. "I am Kara. I come from Nixara, a world many light years from your own, and I have a question for you." Owen tilted his head, his skepticism rising to the surface like a bubble in his lukewarm coffee. "A question. Right. Of course. Because that's what usually happens when strangers appear out of thin air and know my name." Kara ignored his sarcasm, her gaze steady. "Would you leave Earth and come with me, human?" The cafe collectively gasped. Somewhere in the corner, someone dropped a bagel, the muffled thud echoing in the silence. Owen, for his part, stared at her like she'd just asked him to solve advanced calculus while juggling flaming chainsaws. What?" he stammered. "Leave Earth? As in, permanently?" "Yes," she said simply, as if discussing the weather. "Lady," Owen said, leaning back in his chair, "I don't even like leaving Tannersville. The last time I tried, my car broke down 3 miles out of town, and I ended up walking back with a sunburn and a very judgmental raccoon watching me from the roadside. So forgive me if I'm not exactly jumping at the chance to book a one-way ticket to, what did you call it? Nixara." Kyra's smile deepened, and for a moment Owen swore he saw a flicker of stars reflected in her irises. "You are amusing, Owen Harper," she said, "but I assure you, this is no jest. The invitation is genuine." Owen blinked again, trying to process the absurdity of the situation. "You know, I always thought if aliens ever showed up, they'd go for someone a little more qualified, like a scientist or a diplomat, not a guy who spends most of his time wondering if he can get away with doing laundry every other week." Kara tilted her head, her expression curious. "You underestimate yourself. I have studied your species for some time, and you possess qualities that make you unique." "Unique," Owen repeated deadpan. "Right. Is that alien speak for mediocre but charming in a scrappy underdog sort of way?" She didn't answer immediately. Instead, she reached into the folds of her shimmering garment and produced a small spherical device that looked like a glass marble filled with liquid light. She held it out to him, the object glowing faintly in her palm. "This is a glimpse of Nixara," she said. "Perhaps it will help you understand why I've come." Owen hesitated, his instincts screaming that touching mysterious glowing objects handed to you by strange women was generally a bad idea. But his curiosity, always his most reckless trait, won out. He reached for the sphere, and the moment his fingers brushed its surface, the cafe disappeared. In its place was a vision so breathtaking, it stole the air from his lungs. He stood on a platform suspended high above an alien city, its spires glittering like gemstones against a backdrop of swirling auroras. Rivers of light, actual living light, flowed through the streets below, and creatures of impossible beauty moved gracefully through the scene, their forms flickering between solid and translucent as they walked. The air hummed with a symphony of sounds that seemed to resonate not just in his ears but in his very bones. Owen stumbled back, the vision vanishing as abruptly as it had appeared. He was back in the cafe, Kara watching him with quiet intensity. "That," he managed, his voice hoarse, "was something." Kara nodded. "That is my home, and I am inviting you to be part of it." Owen sank back into his chair, his mind spinning. He was a man who struggled to choose between pancakes and waffles at breakfast. How was he supposed to decide whether to leave his entire planet behind? As he sat there, grappling with the weight of the question, Kara's expression softened. "Take your time," she said gently. "I will wait." Owen sighed, running a hand through his hair. "Well," he muttered, "there goes my quiet morning." Kara's lips twitched, the faintest hint of amusement flickering across her face. "I suspect your mornings are about to become much less quiet, Owen Harper." And for the first time in a long time, Owen felt a spark of something unfamiliar, a mixture of fear and excitement, like standing on the edge of a cliff and wondering what it would feel like to jump. The days following Kara's sudden appearance were, in Owen's words, "the weirdest days of my life," and I once got locked in a gas station bathroom for 3 hours with a feral squirrel. Kara had decided to stay in Tannersville for a while, giving Owen time to consider her proposition. What this meant in practical terms was that she had inserted herself into his daily routine with a casualness that bordered on alarming. Owen woke one morning to find her sitting cross-legged in his living room, examining his collection of mismatched coffee mugs with the reverence of an archaeologist discovering ancient pottery. She was fascinated by their slogans: "World's okayest dad," "I'm only here for the Wi-Fi," and her favorite, "Mug Life." "These artifacts are peculiar," she remarked, holding up a mug emblazoned with a cartoon llama wearing sunglasses. "They're not artifacts," Owen groaned, rubbing sleep from his eyes. "They're just mugs." She gave him a look that somehow managed to convey both amusement and mild condescension. "Every object tells a story, Owen Harper. Even your llama." Owen sighed, already resigning himself to another day of Kara turning his life upside down. Kara's presence in Tannersville didn't go unnoticed. Small towns have a way of amplifying every whisper into a roar, and Kara's arrival was no exception. Her otherworldly beauty and strange demeanor quickly became the talk of the town. "She's a model," Owen told his nosy neighbor, Mrs. Crenshaw, when she asked why a fancy city woman was staying with him. "A model of what?" Mrs. Crenshaw squinted suspiciously. Futuristic fashion?" he tried, cringing inwardly at his own terrible lie. Kara, to her credit, seemed unbothered by the attention. If anything, she found humanity's quirks endlessly amusing. She spent hours observing people in the cafe, marveling at the rituals of coffee consumption and the peculiar way humans insisted on adding whipped cream to beverages that were already plenty sweet. One afternoon, she leaned across the table to ask Owen, "Why do humans consume caffeine when it clearly exacerbates your anxiety?" Owen raised an eyebrow. "Says the alien who just downed 3 cups of espresso." Kara looked at her empty cups with a sheepish smile. "I find the sensation invigorating. Despite her fascination with Earth culture, Kara also brought pieces of Nyxara into Owen's life, whether he liked it or not. One evening, she introduced him to a device she called an emotive harmonizer. It looked like a crystal orb encased in a web of glowing filaments, and when she activated it, the device began to hum softly, emitting colors that shifted in response to their moods. Nyxarans use these to communicate emotions more effectively, Kara explained, holding the orb between them. Owen watched in awe as the orb's colors morphed from a serene blue to a warm gold, reflecting Kara's calm and contentment. When he touched it, the colors turned a chaotic swirl of red and green. "What does that mean?" he asked nervously. Kara studied the orb, her expression unreadable. "It appears you are conflicted, possibly agitated." "That's just my default setting," Owen muttered, pulling his hand back as the orb's colors flared into an alarming shade of orange. Kara's laugh was soft, but genuine, and for a moment, Owen felt a flicker of something he couldn't quite name, an unspoken connection that transcended words. As the days passed, Owen found himself warming to Kara's presence despite her penchant for turning his life into a surreal blend of sci-fi and sitcom. She had an uncanny ability to find humor in the mundane, whether it was her confusion over Earth's obsession with reality TV. Why do you watch strangers argue when you could simply visit your neighbors? Or her delight in trying and failing to master Earth idioms. "Piece of cake?" she said one afternoon, frowning as she held an actual slice of chocolate cake. "This task has nothing to do with dessert. It means something's easy," Owen explained, struggling to suppress a grin. "Ah," she nodded solemnly. "In that case, this Earth saying is not accurate." She pointed to the half-eaten cake. "I find this object difficult to consume." "It's because you're using a fork," Owen said, shaking his head. "You're supposed to eat it with your hands." Kara raised an eyebrow, clearly skeptical. "Your species' table manners are perplexing." Through it all, the question of her invitation lingered in the background, a silent presence that neither of them fully addressed. Kara didn't press him for an answer, but she had a way of dropping hints, small glimpses into her world that made the choice harder to ignore. One evening, as they sat on the porch watching the sunset, Kara produced a small bracelet from her pocket. When she placed it on Owen's wrist, the band lit up, projecting a holographic map of the galaxy above them. "This is where I come from," she said, pointing to a faint cluster of stars near the edge of the projection. Owen stared at the map, his breath catching as he realized the scale of the universe she was showing him. "It's so far away." "Yes," she agreed, "but distance is relative. Nyxara is closer than you think." Owen looked at her, his skepticism battling with the awe he felt. "You make it sound like it's just down the street." Kara smiled, her gaze fixed on the stars. "For some of us, it is." By the end of the week, Owen's life had taken on a rhythm he never expected, one filled with alien technology, interstellar maps, and a woman who could both baffle and charm him in equal measure. But as much as Kara brought wonder and humor into his life, she also forced him to confront a question he'd been avoiding. Was he willing to leave everything he'd ever known for the promise of something extraordinary? For now, Owen wasn't ready to answer, but he couldn't deny that Kara had ignited a spark of curiosity in him, a sense of adventure he hadn't felt in years. And as they sat on the porch that evening, the stars twinkling above them, Owen couldn't help but wonder, what if? Owen Harper was no stranger to strange days. He'd been to more than a few awkward high school reunions and once attended a Renaissance fair entirely by accident. But nothing could prepare him for the experience of having an alien woman as a house guest. Kara, for all her otherworldly grace, was surprisingly easygoing when it came to the peculiarities of human life. She didn't flinch at the creaky pipes in his old house or complain about his lumpy couch. though she did express mild confusion over his collection of action figures. "These warriors," she said one morning, holding up a plastic figurine of a caped superhero. "Why are they trapped in this form?" "They're not trapped," Owen said, yawning over his coffee. "They're collectibles. You know, for fun." Kara tilted her head, her expression skeptical. "Fun? Your species finds joy in preserving miniature effigies of your champions?" "Look, don't judge me," Owen grumbled, setting his mug down. "I'm not the one who showed up uninvited with a glowing orb and a cosmic proposal." Her lips twitched, a hint of amusement breaking through her composed demeanor. "Touché, Owen Harper." But despite her willingness to adapt, Kara's presence brought an undeniable ripple to the fabric of Tannersville's sleepy routines. People were noticing her more, their curiosity blooming into wild theories. Some speculated she was a visiting movie star researching a role. Others thought she was part of an elaborate prank show. "Maybe she's a government spy," Owen's neighbor, Greg, whispered conspiratorially during a grocery store encounter. "A spy?" Owen echoed, raising an eyebrow. "What, like James Bond, but with better cheekbones?" Greg shrugged. "All I'm saying is, she's got that mysterious vibe. And those eyes, they're not normal." "Neither are yours, Greg," Owen shot back. "You wear sunglasses indoors." Greg huffed and wandered off, leaving Owen shaking his head. If only they knew. Kara, meanwhile, was making herself at home in the most unexpected ways. One afternoon, Owen walked into the living room to find her sitting cross-legged on the floor, surrounded by an assortment of Earth snacks she'd apparently raided from his pantry. "What are you doing?" he asked, eyeing the open bags of chips and candy. "I am conducting an experiment," she said matter-of-factly, holding up a licorice stick like it was a scientific specimen. "On what? Diabetes?" Kara didn't rise to the bait. Instead, she bit into the licorice and frowned, her expression one of intense concentration. "This one tastes peculiar, sweet, yet oddly synthetic." "That's because it's basically edible plastic," Owen said, plopping onto the couch. "Try the peanut butter cups, they're humanity's greatest invention." She complied, unwrapping the candy with the precision of a surgeon. The moment she bit into it, her eyes widened in genuine delight. This is extraordinary." "Right?" Owen grinned, leaning back. "If you think that's good, wait until you try pizza." As the days passed, Kara began to open up more about her world. Nixara, she explained, was a place of harmony and innovation, where technology and nature coexisted seamlessly. She spoke of cities built within crystalline forests, where structures glowed with an inner light, and of rivers that carried not water but pure energy. "Nixarans value connection," she said one evening as they sat under the stars. "To each other, to our environment, to the universe itself. Every action we take is guided by the understanding that we are part of something greater." Owen listened, captivated despite himself. "Sounds nice," he said. "A little utopian, maybe, but nice." "It is not perfect," Kara admitted, her tone thoughtful. "But it is home." He glanced at her, the weight of her words sinking in. "And you're willing to leave all that? For what? To recruit some random guy from Earth?" Kara turned to him, her gaze steady. "You are not random, Owen Harper. You are different," Owen snorted. "Different? That's one way to put it." Kara smiled faintly, but didn't elaborate, leaving him to stew in his own uncertainty. It wasn't long before Owen started noticing things, small, subtle shifts that hinted at the gravity of Kara's presence. Electronics in his house began acting up, their screens flickering with strange patterns whenever she was near. His cat, Whiskers, who normally treated visitors with haughty disdain, had taken an inexplicable liking to Kara, often curling up in her lap as if she were an old friend. And then there were the dreams. They started off innocently enough, vivid scenes of alien landscapes filled with glowing plants and skies, painted in hues he'd never seen before. But as the nights went on, The dreams became more specific, more personal. He saw himself walking alongside Kara through those luminous forests, laughing at her attempts to understand Earth humor. He felt the warmth of her hand in his, the unspoken bond between them growing stronger with each step. When he woke, the feelings lingered, a strange mix of longing and confusion. One morning, as Owen sat on the porch nursing his coffee, Kara joined him, her presence as serene as the dawn. "You're quiet today," she remarked, sitting beside him. "Just thinking," he said, swirling the coffee in his mug. "About my offer?" "About everything," he admitted. "You, Nixara, this whole situation. It's a lot to process." Kara nodded, her expression understanding. "Take your time, Owen Harper. The choice is yours to make." He appreciated her patience, even if it only made the decision harder. How do you choose between the familiar comforts of home and the unknown wonders of the universe? "I gotta say," Owen began, attempting to lighten the mood, "for someone trying to convince me to leave my planet, you're doing a pretty good job of making me want to stay here." Kara arched an eyebrow. "How so?" "Well, for starters, you introduced me to the idea of aliens who actually enjoy peanut butter cups. That alone raises the bar for visitors from other planets." Kara laughed, a soft, melodic sound that seemed to carry on the breeze. "Then I suppose I will have to try harder to persuade you." "Good luck with that," Owen said, leaning back in his chair. "I'm notoriously stubborn." Kara's smile deepened, a glint of mischief in her eyes. Challenge accepted. And as the sun rose higher in the sky, casting its golden light over Tannersville, Owen couldn't help but feel that his world, small and ordinary as it was, had grown a little bit bigger since Kara's arrival. Owen Harper had a gift for understatement, and when he described his current life as a bit unusual, it was a masterpiece of downplaying. After all, it wasn't every day that a guy found himself hosting an intergalactic visitor who also happened to be the most graceful peanut butter cup enthusiast he'd ever met. Kara's integration into his world continued in unexpected ways. Her curiosity seemed boundless, and she'd taken to exploring Tannersville as if it were a museum exhibit curated just for her. This was equal parts fascinating and mildly terrifying for Owen, who spent much of his time either explaining Earth customs or apologizing for them. One morning, Owen walked into his kitchen to find Kara experimenting with his coffee maker. The machine, a battered relic of his college days, now had strange glowing filaments snaking out from its base. "What are you doing to my coffee maker?" he asked, eyeing the contraption warily. "Enhancing it," Kara replied, as if this were the most obvious thing in the world. "Enhancing it how?" She glanced at him with a sly smile. "You'll see." Against his better judgment, Owen let her finish. When she handed him the first cup of the modified brew, the coffee shimmered with an iridescent hue that screamed, "Not FDA approved." "I'm not drinking that," he said, pushing the mug away. Kara tilted her head, clearly amused. "It's perfectly safe. I merely adjusted the molecular composition to increase its energy output." "Yeah, because that's what coffee needs," Owen muttered. "More energy." After a moment of internal debate and Kara's unrelenting stare, he took a tentative sip. The flavor exploded on his tongue, a perfect blend of rich earthiness and subtle sweetness. "This is incredible," he admitted, taking another gulp. Kara smirked. "You're welcome." Kara's adventures around town, however, weren't always so successful. One afternoon, she decided to explore the local hardware store. Owen had reluctantly tagged along, hoping to minimize any potential disasters. It was a noble effort, but it quickly became clear that Kara's understanding of Earth tools was, at best, rudimentary. "What is the purpose of this device?" she asked, holding up a bright pink plunger. Owen suppressed a laugh. "That's for unclogging toilets." Kara frowned, examining the plunger as if it held the secrets of the universe. "Primitive, yet ingenious," she said finally. And that's the tagline for humanity in a nutshell, Owen quipped. The store clerk, an elderly man named Gus, watched their exchange with a bemused expression. Your lady friend's not from around here, is she? You could say that, Owen replied. Kara, meanwhile, had moved on to inspecting a leaf blower. When she accidentally activated it, sending a blast of air through the aisle, Owen decided it was time to leave. Back at home, Kara shared more about Nixaran technology, introducing Owen to a device she called a stellar fractalizer. The device, a small disc that fit neatly in her palm, created intricate holographic patterns that danced in the air like living constellations. What does it do? Owen asked, mesmerized by the swirling lights. It's an artistic tool, Kara explained. Nixarans use it to express their emotions through visual design. So it's like alien Photoshop? Kara's lips twitched. In a manner of speaking, yes. She handed the fractalizer to Owen, encouraging him to try it. The device responded instantly, creating chaotic patterns that shifted erratically between sharp angles and soft curves. Kara observed his creation with a raised eyebrow. This is unique. Unique good or unique bad? Unique human, she said diplomatically. Owen chuckled, setting the device down. I'll take it. Amid the humor and curiosity, there were moments when the weight of Kara's invitation loomed over them like a storm cloud. One evening, as they sat by the fire pit in Owen's backyard, she broached the topic again. Have you given my offer more thought? She asked, her tone gentle but insistent. Owen poked at the fire with a stick, watching the embers rise into the night sky. I don't know, Kara. It's not exactly a small decision, you know. Leaving everything behind, going to another planet. I understand, she said, her gaze steady. But I would not ask this of you if I did not believe you were capable of such a journey. Owen sighed, leaning back in his chair. I just don't get it. Why me? Out of all the people on this planet, why did you pick the guy who once got lost in his own hometown? Kara smiled softly, her eyes reflecting the firelight. Because you see the world differently, Owen Harper. You have a gift for finding humor in the absurd, for seeing beauty in imperfection. Nixara could use someone like you. He snorted. Sounds like Nixara's standards are pretty low. Her smile widened. On the contrary, our standards are simply unique. As the night deepened, Owen found himself staring at the stars, the vast expanse of the universe feeling both comforting and daunting. Kara sat beside him, her presence as steady as the constellations above. You know, he said after a long silence, I always thought my life was supposed to be normal, simple. But now with you here, it's like the universe is daring me to think bigger. Kara glanced at him, her expression unreadable. And will you accept the dare? Owen didn't answer right away. Instead, he reached for the stellar fractalizer and activated it, letting its pattern swirl into the night. The shapes were chaotic and imperfect, but there was a certain beauty in their unpredictability, a reflection, perhaps, of his own tangled thoughts. I don't know, he said finally, but I'm starting to think, maybe I should. Kara said nothing, but the smile that spread across her face spoke volumes. And as the fractals danced against the stars, Owen felt for the first time a glimmer of excitement mingling with his uncertainty. Owen Harper didn't know how long it took for a person's life to feel unrecognizable, but he was pretty sure he'd crossed that threshold. His days now swung wildly between mundane errands and surreal conversations about the fabric of the universe. It was like starring in a sitcom that occasionally cut to a hard sci-fi drama. For every moment of cosmic insight Kara shared, there was an equally baffling moment where she couldn't grasp the simplicity or absurdity of human life. Take, for instance, the grocery store incident. Owen had taken Kara shopping to restock the essentials. While he tried to explain the fine art of choosing ripe avocados without actually smashing them, she became fixated on the cereal aisle. Why are there so many varieties? She asked, holding a box of neon-colored loops. Because people like options, Owen said, tossing a box of generic bran flakes into the cart. But most of these appear nutritionally void, she said, turning the box over to read the ingredients. This one contains marshmallows. Yeah, that's Lucky Charms. Breakfast of champions, Owen said, grinning. Kara frowned. I thought champions required sustenance, not confectionery disguised as nutrition. That's capitalism for you, Owen quipped. Before Kara could dissect the aisle further, Owen gently steered her toward the produce section, muttering something about how even aliens weren't immune to the lure of bright packaging. Despite her fascination with Earth's quirks, Kara remained focused on her mission, and Owen couldn't deny that he was starting to feel the weight of her proposal. One afternoon, she revealed a piece of Nixaran technology she had thus far kept hidden, the Starbridge node. The device looked deceptively simple, a smooth metallic sphere no larger than a basketball, but when Kara activated it, the air around them shimmered with a faint hum, as though the molecules themselves were vibrating in anticipation. What is this? Owen asked, his voice tinged with awe. It is a gateway, Kara explained. A fragment of Nixaran technology capable of creating a temporary link between our world and yours. It is how I traveled here. Owen blinked, taking a cautious step back. You mean, you've got a teleportation device just lying around my house? Of course, Kara said, her tone entirely matter-of-fact. Okay, but you couldn't tell me this before I spent 2 hours explaining how GPS works? Kara tilted her head, a hint of amusement in her eyes. I did not wish to overwhelm you. Yeah, because nothing about this situation is overwhelming, Owen muttered. As Kara demonstrated the node's capabilities, the living room transformed into a surreal gallery of Nixaran imagery. Holographic projections filled the space, showing glimpses of Kara's homeworld, towering crystalline structures that shimmered like prisms, vast fields of bioluminescent flora, and skies that seemed to swirl with an endless palette of colors. Owen found himself mesmerized, his earlier sarcasm fading as he took in the beauty of it all. This is Nixara, Kara said softly, her voice tinged with a note of longing. A place where every living thing exists in harmony, where progress does not come at the cost of nature's balance. Owen couldn't tear his eyes away. It's incredible. Kara turned to him, her gaze piercing. You could see it for yourself, Owen Harper, if you are willing. The weight of her words settled over him, and for once he didn't have a witty comeback. Later that evening, Owen sat on the porch trying to make sense of his own tangled thoughts. The decision Kara had placed before him felt impossibly large, like staring into a black hole and trying to decide whether to step inside. His internal debate was interrupted by Kara, who joined him with a steaming mug in hand. I made more enhanced coffee, she said, handing it to him. Owen accepted the mug, though he eyed it with suspicion. You didn't, accidentally make it radioactive, did you? Of course not, Kara said with mock offense. It's perfectly safe. He took a cautious sip, and to his surprise, it tasted even better than the last batch. Okay, I hate that you're better at coffee than me, but I'll allow it. Kara smirked, settling into the chair beside him. You seem troubled. Gee, what gave it away? Owen said, gesturing vaguely at the sky. Kara tilted her head, studying him. You have questions. Owen nodded. Yeah, what happens if I say yes? I mean, what would my life even look like on Nixara? Would I stick out like a sore thumb? Would I even survive there? You would not be alone, Kara assured him. Nixarans are a curious and welcoming people. They would celebrate your arrival, just as they have embraced others before you. Wait, Owen said, straightening in his chair. Others? There are other humans on Nixara? Kara hesitated, then nodded. A few. Over the centuries, we have extended invitations to those we believed could thrive among us. Owen leaned forward, His curiosity piqued. And? How'd they do? Some adapted beautifully, Kara said, her tone wistful. Others chose to return to Earth. The revelation left Owen reeling. Return? So it's not a one-way trip? Kara smiled faintly. Not unless you wish it to be. The choice is always yours. That night, Owen couldn't sleep. His dreams were filled with fragments of Kara's world, vivid and tantalizing. He saw himself walking through those crystalline forests, his footsteps leaving trails of light in the grass. He heard laughter, Kyara's laughter, echoing through a city that seemed to pulse with life itself. But amid the wonder, there was also fear. Fear of the unknown, of leaving behind everything he'd ever known, of becoming a stranger in a strange land. When he woke, the question still burned in his mind. Could he really do it? Could he leave Earth behind? As the first rays of dawn broke through his window, Owen found Kara already awake, standing in the living room with the Starbridge node cradled in her hands. I had a feeling you'd wake early, she said, her voice soft but knowing. Owen rubbed his eyes, stepping closer. You're not going to pressure me, are you? Never, Kara said. But I will remind you of this. Life is full of choices, Owen Harper, and sometimes the most extraordinary ones lead to the greatest discoveries. He chuckled, though it sounded hollow. No pressure, huh? Kara's smile was gentle. Only opportunity. And as the morning light filtered through the windows, casting the room in a golden glow, Owen couldn't help but wonder if the universe was waiting for him to take a leap of faith. Owen Harper had always been a master of procrastination, whether it was filing taxes, fixing the leaky faucet in his kitchen, or deciding the trajectory of his entire existence. He had a special talent for putting things off. But now, as he stood on the precipice of an interstellar crossroads, even his usual blend of humor and avoidance couldn't shield him from the magnitude of Kara's offer. The day began like many others since Kara's arrival, with her effortlessly blending the alien with the mundane. I've adjusted the toaster, Kara announced over breakfast. Owen looked up from his plate of scrambled eggs, alarm bells already ringing. Adjusted it how? It now operates with quantum precision, Kara said, as if this were an obvious improvement. Your bread will be toasted to perfection on a molecular level. Owen stared at her, then at the toaster, which now had faintly glowing filaments and emitted a low hum that sounded suspiciously like it was contemplating world domination. Kara, he said cautiously, I just want toast. Not a Nobel Prize in thermodynamics. She gave him a bemused look. You underestimate the importance of precise toasting. Owen sighed, deciding it wasn't worth the argument. He pressed the lever, and to his surprise, the bread emerged moments later as the most evenly toasted slices he'd ever seen. Okay, I'll admit, he said, biting into the toast. This is objectively amazing, but if that thing starts talking, I'm throwing it out the window. As the day wore on, Kara seemed unusually subdued, as though she could sense Owen's growing unease. She spent much of the afternoon tinkering with the Starbridge node while Owen paced the living room, trying to wrap his head around what leaving Earth would actually mean. At one point, he stopped and looked at her. What's the biggest culture shock I'd face on Nixara? Be honest. Kara paused, considering. Well, for starters, Nixarans don't sleep the way humans do. We enter a regenerative state that is more akin to deep meditation. No sleep? Owen asked, horrified. How do you guys survive Monday mornings? Kara smiled faintly. We do not have Mondays. Time on Nixara is not segmented into rigid weeks. Owen groaned. No weekends, no lazy Sundays. Kara, you're really selling me on this whole intergalactic utopia thing. Do you truly find comfort in monotony? She asked, tilting her head in that curious way she often did. He opened his mouth to respond, but stopped himself. Did he? That evening, Kara proposed something bold, a demonstration of what awaited him on Nixara. I can show you a glimpse, she said, holding up the Starbridge node. Not a full journey, merely a window into my world. Owen hesitated. This isn't going to, scramble my brain, is it? Kara's lips twitched with amusement. I assure you, your neural pathways will remain intact. Comforting, he muttered, though he reluctantly agreed. Kara activated the node, and the air around them shimmered with a soft, pulsating glow. Suddenly, the room seemed to dissolve, replaced by a breathtaking vista of Nyxara's surface. Owen found himself standing on a crystalline platform, surrounded by towering structures that seemed to refract the light in a symphony of colors. The air was cool and tinged with a faint floral scent, unlike anything he'd ever experienced. Welcome, Kara said, gesturing around them. This is the capital city of Nyxara, Lyrathus. Owen turned in a slow circle, taking it all in. It's beautiful, he said, his voice barely above a whisper. A group of Nyxarans passed by, their elegant forms moving with a grace that made Owen feel like a clumsy marionette. One of them paused, offering a curious smile before continuing on. Do they know I'm a projection? He asked. They can sense your presence, Kara explained. Nyxarans are attuned to the energy of living beings, even across dimensions. Owen nodded, though he wasn't entirely sure he understood. Kara led him to a nearby garden, filled with luminescent plants that seemed to sway gently, even without a breeze. She plucked a small, glowing fruit from one of the trees and handed it to him. Try it, she said. Owen eyed the fruit suspiciously. This isn't going to turn me into a Nyxaran, is it? Kara laughed, a sound that was becoming one of his favorite things in the universe. Number it will merely nourish you. He took a cautious bite and was immediately hit with a burst of flavors that defied description. It was sweet, tangy, and oddly familiar, like a blend of every fruit he'd ever loved, but with an added layer of complexity. Okay, that's unfair, he said, taking another bite. Your food's better than ours. Kara smiled. I'll take that as a compliment. As the projection faded and they returned to his living room, Owen felt a pang of loss, as though he'd just woken from a dream he wasn't ready to leave. Kara studied him closely. What are you thinking? He ran a hand through his hair, struggling to put his thoughts into words. I'm thinking, I didn't realize how small my world was until you showed me yours. Her expression softened. And does that frighten you? Terrifies me, he admitted. But it also excites me. Kara's gaze held his, steady and unyielding. Then perhaps you're ready to take the next step. And that night, as Owen lay in bed, he found himself staring at the ceiling, his mind racing. The vision of Nyxara lingered in his thoughts, vivid and tantalizing. But with the wonder came the doubts. What if he couldn't adapt? What if he made a fool of himself in front of an entire civilization? What if he said yes and regretted it? And yet, despite the fears, one thought kept resurfacing. What if he said no and never knew what could have been? As sleep finally claimed him, Owen's dreams were filled with images of crystalline cities, glowing gardens, and a certain alien woman who had turned his world upside down. And for the first time, he wondered if that wasn't such a bad thing after all. The morning of Owen Harper's decision began like any other, with the sun spilling through his blinds and the faint chirping of birds in the distance. For a moment, he could almost pretend that his life was still ordinary, mundane even. But as his gaze fell on the Starbridge node sitting on the coffee table, gleaming faintly in the soft light, reality settled back in with the weight of a small moon. Kara was already awake, seated cross-legged on the floor and tinkering with one of her many devices. The faint glow of the tools in her hands lit up her face, and Owen marveled at how she seemed so effortlessly otherworldly and yet somehow at home in his cluttered living room. Morning, he said, rubbing the sleep from his eyes. Kara looked up and smiled. Good morning, Owen Harper. Did you sleep well? Well, I dreamed of Nyxara again, he admitted, flopping onto the couch. So, no pressure or anything. Her smile softened, but she didn't say anything. She never pushed him. That was the thing about Kara. She could have easily dazzled him into submission with her technology, her world, her entire existence. But instead, she let him come to terms with the decision in his own messy human way. Then the day passed in a blur of small moments. They went for a walk in the park, where Kara marveled at the peculiar persistence of squirrels. They hoard resources with such fervor, she observed, watching one furry critter scurry up a tree. Yeah, well, winter's rough, Owen said. Can't blame them for being prepared. Kara tilted her head, thoughtful. Perhaps there is wisdom in their behavior. Even the smallest creatures understand the importance of readiness. Are you calling me a squirrel, Kara? She smirked. If the tail fits. By late afternoon, Owen found himself standing in his kitchen, staring at the half-empty coffee pot as though it held the answers to the universe. The decision loomed larger with each passing hour, and no amount of caffeine could shake the weight of it. Kara joined him, her expression unreadable. You are troubled. You don't say, he replied with a weak laugh. She stepped closer, her presence calm and steady. Whatever choice you make, Owen Harper, it will be the right one, because it will be yours. Her words hit him harder than he expected. You keep saying that, but what if I make the wrong choice? What if I regret it? Kara's gaze softened. Regret is a uniquely human concept, but it is not one we Nixerans dismiss. It is the shadow of your ambition, the echo of paths not taken. But it is not your enemy. It is merely a reminder that you lived. Owen stared at her, floored. Okay, that was annoyingly profound. She smiled, a hint of mischief in her eyes. I have my moments. As evening settled in, Owen found himself standing on the porch, Kara by his side. The Starbridge node sat between them, humming softly, its glow pulsing like a heartbeat. This is it, huh? He said, his voice quiet. Kara nodded. The moment of decision. For a long while, they stood in silence, the weight of the moment filling the air. Owen's mind raced with everything he would be leaving behind if he said yes. His job, his friends, his familiar routines. But then he thought of Nixara, the crystalline cities, the glowing gardens, the chance to experience something beyond anything he could have imagined. Do you ever regret leaving your world to come here? He asked suddenly. Kara looked at him, her expression thoughtful. I miss Nixara, yes, but I do not regret meeting you, Owen Harper. You have shown me the beauty of your world, even in its imperfections, and for that I am grateful. Owen chuckled, though his voice was tinged with emotion. You know you make it really hard to say no. Her gaze held his, steady and unwavering. Then do not. The moment stretched, time seeming to slow as Owen stood at the edge of an impossible choice. And then, with a deep breath, he made his decision. I'm going to stay, he said, his voice firm but laced with uncertainty. Kara's expression didn't falter. If she was disappointed, she didn't show it. Instead, she simply nodded. Then I respect your choice. Owen hesitated, searching her face. Are you okay with that? I am, she said softly. Because your journey does not end here. Staying does not mean stagnation, Owen Harper. It means you have chosen to face your world with the knowledge of what lies beyond. Her words settled over him like a balm, easing the tension he hadn't realized he was holding. And you? He asked, his voice quieter now. What happens to you? Kara smiled faintly. I will return to Nixara, but my connection to this world remains. Perhaps one day our paths will cross again. Owen felt a pang of loss at the thought, but he nodded. I'd like that. The next morning, Kara activated the Starbridge node one final time. The living room filled with the soft glow of its energy, casting ethereal patterns on the walls. Goodbye, Owen Harper, she said, her voice steady but warm. "Goodbye, Kara," he replied, his heart heavy but resolute. And then, with a shimmer of light, she was gone. In the days and weeks that followed, Owen found himself reflecting on their time together. He threw himself into his work with renewed purpose, his perspective forever changed by the glimpse of something greater. He started volunteering at local science programs, sharing his newfound curiosity with others. He even began writing, chronicling his experiences in a way that felt both cathartic and deeply personal. And though he often found himself staring at the night sky, wondering what Kara was doing on her distant world, he felt at peace with his choice. Because in the end, Kara was right. Staying didn't mean he had chosen the ordinary. It meant he had chosen to find the extraordinary in the world he already knew.